What's up guys, it is Kit, your favorite dating coach. I've got a really interesting article here. I've only seen the title and I've heard a couple of things about it already, so I want to just go through it and I want to break it down to see what's relevant from it, that we can take from it, and especially for you ladies and even for you guys as well. So let's get into it. So, I left the love of my life because I thought I could do better. Now I'm childless and alone at 42. And this was published back in 2013, but it's been updated in 2017. So this is still like a 5 years ago, handful of years ago. Laughing and dancing with my fiance at our engagement party, I thought I might actually burst with happiness. Surrounded by our family and friends, I looked at Matthew and felt certain I'd met the man I was going to spend the rest of my life with. Quite simply, he was my soulmate. And this must be her. She looks like a nice woman. Karen Cross. Oh, Karen. We were desperately in love and had our future life together mapped out. First, we'd save to buy our own home, then would come a romantic wedding ceremony, and children would follow. It all seemed so simple to my naive 19-year-old self. Wow, 19. It's young. I smugly told myself, the girl who had it all. Which sounds like from all the things that she wanted that she did. So why, 20 years later, do I find myself single, childless, and tormented by the fact that I have thrown away the only true chance of happiness I ever had? And that's just like a picture of her back in the day. Oh, she does look very happy. 8 years after that wonderful engagement party in 1989, I walked away from dear, devoted, loyal Matthew, convinced that somewhere out there a better, more exciting, more fulfilling life awaited me. Only there wasn't. Wow, this happens more often than I can count. People leave really good, really contentful relationships that while they might not be the most exciting and explosive ones, they think that there's something better out there for what they want. And it's only when they leave and realize there isn't, they don't have that same kind of contentment with someone and security with someone, they've realized that they let a good one go. Now I am 42 and have all the trappings of success, a high-flying career, financial security, and a home in the heart of London's trendy Notting Hill. But I don't have the one thing I crave more than anything: a loving husband and a family. I literally talked about this in one of my most recent videos. The most unhappiest demographic of women today are women who are high earning, high achievers, over the age of 35, have no husband and no kids and never married. I literally talked about this in my video about success for women, and for the kind of woman who does want to have a husband and family, getting to this point, while it seems great on the outside in terms of all the financial success and everything, it's not that fulfilling for them ultimately. You see, I never did find another man who offered everything Matthew did, who understood me and loved me like he did, someone who was my best friend as well as my lover. Today, seeing friends with their children around them tortures me, as I know I am unlikely to ever have a family of my own. I think about the times Matthew and I talked about having children, even discussed the names we would choose. I cannot believe I turned my back on so much happiness. Instead, here I am back on the singles market, looking for the very thing I discarded with barely a backward glance all those years ago. Hindsight is sometimes a painful thing. We don't always get second chances, and sometimes we only realize the value of something once we've lost it or once we've let it go. I know I can't have Matthew back, and it hurts when I hear snippets of information about his life and how content he is. 15 years after I ended our relationship, he is happily married. At this time of year, so many people will be assessing their lives and relationships, wondering if the grass is greener on the other side. Many will mistake contentment for boredom, forgetting to cherish the good things that they have. I would urge those who are considering walking away from such riches to think again. Literally what I just said. Contentment is not the same as boredom. And I think we have to make sure we differentiate the difference, because Chris Rock said it best: married and bored or single and lonely. I would say that anybody who is in a relationship, who is wanting something serious, if the biggest issue with your relationship is that you are bored and that for you there's not quote unquote enough excitement, if that is the only problem, then you are in a great relationship. You are in a good relationship and you have a good partner if that is the only problem, that you're bored and there's not enough excitement. Because here's the thing, you can create excitement. And the thing that sometimes we fail to realize is that the kind of guy who creates the roller coaster of emotional excitement isn't the kind of guy who's going to provide you that security long term. He's not the guy who's going to make you feel safe long term. And also, you can have moments of high adrenaline rushes and then really deep anxiety because you don't know whether he's going to go or stay. How different things would be for me now if only I'd listened to Matthew when he pleaded with me not to leave him in 1997, tears pouring down his face. I was crying too, and it tortured me to watch the heart of the man I loved breaking in front of me, but I was resolute. One day I might look back and realise I've made the biggest mistake of my life, I told him as we clung to each other desperately. How prophetic those words have proven to be. Wow, she literally said her own prophecy at that point. I will always be here for you, Matthew promised, and I arrogantly thought that somehow I could put him on ice and return to him. How many people have a backup plan in their back pocket with the nice guy or the safe guy? And here's the thing, for some people that may be okay up to a certain extent, but if they find someone that they're looking for, that backup plan might go straight out the window. Matthew and I met when we attended the same comprehensive school in Essex. We started dating just before Christmas 1987 when I was 17 and studying for my A-levels. By that time he had left school and was working as a motorcycle courier. We got on like a house on fire and our families each supported the relationship. Before long, we had fallen in love. Matthew was romantic but incredibly practical, something that would later come to annoy me. His gifts to me that Christmas were a leather jacket and a pair of thermal leggings. I would love that. Maybe not thermal leggings, but I'll take a leather jacket as a gift. I'll take that. 2 weeks later, when we'd been seeing each other for less than a month, he proposed. What? See each other less than a month, he proposed. That is mad. I would never advocate for that now. We were in my little mini Clubman when he shouted at me to stop the car. Scared something was wrong, I braked in the middle of traffic and we both jumped out. Then oblivious to the other drivers beeping their horns, he got down on one knee in the middle of the road. I love you, Karen Cross, he said. Promise you'll marry me one day. I laughed and said yes, thrilled that he felt the same way that I did. See, it's so interesting how this sounds like the perfect romantic story that we hear all the time. And it's so crazy how so many people are looking for this. And just because you can have the most amazing romantic beginnings doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be happy ever after, or doesn't necessarily mean that if you fail to choose that person, even through times when you don't want to, you will have the longevity of a relationship that maybe you've always wanted. In the summer of 1989, while out for a romantic meal, Matthew proposed properly with a diamond solitaire ring. 2 months later, we had our engagement party for 40 friends and family at the little house we were renting at the time. The following year, we bought a tiny starter home in Grays, Essex, which we moved into the furniture we had begged, borrowed and stolen. We giggled with delight at the thought of this grown-up new life. I was in my first junior role at a woman's magazine and Matthew worked fitting tyres and exhaust, so our combined salaries of around £15,000 a year meant we struggled to make the mortgage payments. That's really not a lot. Oh no, this is back then. 20, 30 years ago. I mean, things were so much cheaper back then anyway. But we didn't care, telling ourselves that it wouldn't be long before we were earning more and able to afford weekly treats and a bigger home where we could bring up the babies we had planned. But then the housing market crashed and we were plunged into negative equity. Struggling should have brought us closer, and at first it did. But as time went on and my magazine career and salary advanced, I started to resent Matthew as he drifted from one dead-end job to another. Wow, I feel like this so clearly indicates that most people think that most marriages end today because of infidelity, when actually the reason most marriages end today is because of financial reasons. And not just financial burdens, but a big part of that, and this is so common, when women say that they want a man who is on their level and higher, if she's in a position where she's the majority breadwinner, or at least for most women, where she's the majority breadwinner for an extended period of time, she will start to resent him and start to subconsciously question his ability as a man to do what she feels is his role to do. Provide security, provide a stable home, and provide stability. So it's not surprising that she started to resent him as she started to work her way up the ladder. I still loved him, but I began to feel embarrassed by his blue-collar jobs, annoyed that despite his intelligence, he didn't have a career. Then he bought a lurid blue and pink VW Beetle. Why couldn't he drive a normal car? Things that now seem incredibly insignificant began to niggle. This is a classic case of where she loves him, but she doesn't respect him. And one of the most important things in a relationship for it to work is that the woman must respect the man as a man. And as she started to advance in her career and started to resent that he wasn't on her level, she lost respect for him. And so all these little things that probably wouldn't have niggled her before now start to niggle at her. I began to wish he was more sophisticated and earned more. I felt envious of friends with better off partners who were able to support them as they started their families. Comparison is the thief of joy. Doesn't matter what's going on with you. Don't compare yourself to other people. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday. I stopped seeing Matthew as my equal. I stopped seeing all qualities that had made me fall in love with him, his fierce intelligence, our shared sense of humor, his determination to follow the road, follow the crowd. Instead, I saw someone who was holding me back. I'm just going to call a spade, man. When I speak to people and say, listen, a man has to become in order for a woman to be able to love him and respect him. This woman fell in love with him when she was young and 19. This woman fell in love with him from day dot, and they got married within the first couple of months. She said that she was so happy that he felt the way that she felt. But because she felt he wasn't performing as a man, she started to not love him. She started to fall out of love with him. I've said this before and I will say this again, and this clearly demonstrates that. Only women, children, and dogs are loved unconditionally. Men are only loved on the condition that they provide something. And I don't mean it has to be material or financial, though those are a big part of it, but providing something that she values. And if a man does not provide these things and continue consistently providing these things, most women will start to fall out of love with him, and that is clearly what happened here. I encouraged him to find a career and was thrilled when he was accepted to join the police in '95. It should have heralded a new chapter in our lives, but it only hastened the end. We went from spending every evening and weekend together to hardly seeing one another. Matthew was doing round-the-clock shifts while I worked long hours on the launch of a new magazine. Our sex life had dwindled and nights out together were rare. I stopped appreciating little things he did, like leaving romantic notes on the pillow or scurrying secondhand bookshelves for novels he knew I'd love. He was my best friend, yet I took him totally for granted. She definitely did take him for granted. And it's funny because most guys, I would argue, aren't like that nowadays. And most women would love to have a guy who does that nowadays. And it's so funny how she was in love with him at the beginning. He was still doing all those things. But because he wasn't doing the condition of a man of having to provide, all those things almost didn't even matter. After festering for weeks about his shortcomings, I told Matthew I was leaving. He spent hours talking and crying as he tried to convince me to stay, but I was adamant. My parents were horrified that I was walking away from a man they felt was right for me. My father's words to me that day continue to haunt me. Karen, think carefully about what you're doing. There's a lot to be said for someone who truly loves you. Very true. But I refused to listen, convinced there would be another, better Mr. Right waiting around the corner. I moved into a rented flat a few miles away in Hornchurch in Essex and embraced single life with a vengeance. By now I was editor on a national magazine. Life was one long round of premieres and dinner or drinks parties. Matthew and I remained close, even telling each other about new relationships. But though I dumped him, I never felt the women he met were good enough. I can see now I was acting out of jealousy. I clearly wanted to keep him for myself. It's clearly that she wanted to keep him as a backup plan if she couldn't find Mr. Right. Let's just call a spade a spade. Clearly that didn't happen because he was clearly a guy who wanted marriage, who wanted to commit to one woman, who wanted to build something with someone. Yeah, of course, hard times came, but she left him for it, so of course he's going to be naturally open to other people. Our closeness was, however, called to a halt in 2000 when he met his first serious girlfriend after me, Sarah. One night shortly after his 34th birthday, I phoned to ask his advice about something. Matthew was unusually abrupt and asked me not to call him again. Please don't send me birthday or Christmas cards anymore either. Sarah opened your card last week and was really upset. I have to put her feelings first. I hated the fact Matthew was suddenly putting another woman before me. How dare she come between us? Over the next few weeks, I'm ashamed to say I vented my spleen at both of them in a series of heated phone calls. Look, he was doing what any decent man in a relationship would do. He was protecting his relationship and protecting the emotions of the woman that he cared about and the woman that he now loves. And it sounds like she couldn't handle losing him as her backup plan. I was completely irrational. I didn't want Matthew back, but felt upstaged by Sarah. I don't want you, but I don't want anyone else to have you either. Unsurprisingly, after one particular nasty argument, Matthew put the phone down and refused to take any more of my calls. I didn't realise it at the time, but I would never speak to him again. Shortly afterwards, I met Richard. It was a whirlwind romance, and within a year, we were engaged and buying an idyllic farmhouse in Norfolk countryside while I continued my journalistic career, commuting to London. He was a successful singer, and as we toured the country, I thought I had finally found the excitement and love that I craved. Great. But Matthew was never far from my thoughts, and Richard complained that I often brought him into conversations, even comparing them both. They were so different. Although outwardly romantic, Richard was repeatedly unfaithful, and I never felt secure enough to start a family with him. Eventually, after 3.5 years together, he walked out, having admitted his latest paramour was pregnant by him. I literally just said this. The guy who gives that excitement, the guy who gives the emotional roller coaster, he gives you those incredible highs, give you those incredible lows of anxiety, and you don't feel secure and safe with him. Yes, he's not boring, but he doesn't provide the security that you would want for starting a family. I literally just said this, and that's exactly what happened. My life fell apart. Over the next year, I struggled to pull myself back together and did a lot of soul searching. I finally understood what my father meant. I realized Matthew was the only person who had loved me and understood me. When I heard through a mutual friend that he had split up with Sarah, I wrote to him apologizing and asking for forgiveness and a second chance. It was 6 years since we had last spoken, but naively I thought he would want to hear from me. What I didn't know was that Sarah was still living at the house, and it was she who opened my very personal letter. It included my phone number, and she left me several angry, hurtful voicemails. Can't blame her, to be honest. Yet again, I had inadvertently caused problems in Matthew's life, so it was unsurprising I never heard from him, despite writing several times over the next few months. In the end, I left it at birthday and Christmas cards, thinking he'd find a way to get in touch if he ever changed his mind. Then I heard a couple of years ago Matthew married his new partner, Nicola. For a few months, I couldn't breathe. Then the tears came. Matthew and Nicola still lived in Essex, and as far as I know, don't yet have any children. That's the next milestone I truly dread. It's been 11 years since Matthew and I last spoke, and I have to accept that door has closed. Perhaps he has found what he is looking for, and I am a distant memory. I have had one other significant relationship since Richard, with Rob, but that recently ended after 4 years. Rob reminded me a lot of Matthew, who is decent and honourable, the life and soul of the party, but with a kind and sensitive side. I wonder why that didn't work out then. But we were each too jaded by previous heartbreak to make it work, and while I wanted children, he had a grown-up son and didn't want to start over again. So once again, I'm on my own, my mind full of if-onlys. If only I stayed with Matthew, would almost certainly be married with children. It's interesting because I almost think if she had stayed with Matthew, she would have been content, but she would have always been wondering what if. However, if you look at the two paths where she chose to leave to see what's out there and realize what she had was great, or the path where she's really content with her relationship and marriage and she'll have children, but she's always wondering, this path she would have been happier in, as we can tell. Or maybe Matthew wasn't the right man. I will never know the answer, but my decision to leave him has definitely cost me the chance of ever becoming a mother. I'll be honest, I think he was the right man, and it passed her by. She had the chance and now it's gone. Now I can only look back and admonish my selfish younger self. When I visit friends and family back in our hometown, I can't help but hope I'll bump into Matthew. I'd like to think I'd say sorry, that I'll always be there for him, but I wouldn't be surprised if he turned his back on me and kept walking. Kind of like the way you turned your back on him. Harsh but true. So those out there thinking of walking away from humdrum relationships, I would say don't mistake contentment for unhappiness as I did. It could be a choice you'll regret for the rest of your life. Wow. This article perfectly demonstrates what I talked about in my most recent video about women who maybe have a more feminine core, who do want to have family and children, but who sacrifice the years that they can do that for the sake of their career. There is a way to have a balance of both. At some point, you're gonna have to choose whether you prioritize family or you prioritize career. And this just shows a path that she chose career, and this is where she is, though desperately or deeply she wanted to have a family. This is a big reason why I started my channel in the first place, because while she may have learned her lesson in hindsight, there are many women who want families out there, but they're being told by our current media that family and children are a waste of time, or they only deter you from your career. and told by current media that the most important thing in your life will be your career. And I think that is such a lie, especially for people who value connection, relationships, and community. Not saying your career isn't important, but I would really ask you to really think about if that is what you want, that maybe it is better to prioritize making something work with someone who you may think is a boring relationship, but at the end of the day, if they love you and if they want to build with you, that should take priority if you want a family over any kind of lack of excitement or seeing if Mr. Better is out there. Because to find somebody who truly loves you for you, that is incredibly rare. Finding someone who truly loves you for you and is willing to work through the tough times with you, that is incredibly rare. If you want a family, I think this is a really good example of, look, there are two choices you can make. Leaving comes with massive risk of not having that. If you want to leave, that's absolutely fine, but just understand you're taking that risk and there's a high risk for that. But tell me what you think. Do you think she was right to leave him and see what's out there, even though that didn't work out for her? Or do you think that she really blew it with the man who she could have had that with, and really she should have stayed if having a family and kids and community around her was what she ultimately wanted in life? If you're looking for a guy who sparks up your love life, make sure you subscribe to this wonderful tribe. And as always, keep it slick.
How?